Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here in this session. I hope you find this lecture meaningful for you. My name is Yuly Andrea González, and I call this presentation Teaching English in Preschool and Elementary Levels in the Colombian Public Context. This is one of the topics that has really caught my attention in the last 7 years. You will find out why in a moment. I want to clarify first that for this presentation, I will refer to primary or elementary level to the grades from first to fifth according to the Colombian educational system. So let's get started. Before sharing the agenda that I will follow in the next 30 minutes, I want to start by sharing this short video while I talk that summarizes somehow my English teaching practice and the role that I have now. I've been a teacher of English for more than 15 years. 10 of them have been for the public sector, and for the last 5, I have been teaching at the elementary level. I work in an immersion class in a public school, and I may say that having this condition in my teaching practice has set some privilege not only for me but also for my students. I'm going to tell you what those privileges are. So, number one, I have a classroom that has been adapted to teach English and implement cooperative work. So that's why you don't see a line of desks in this classroom. Number two, elementary students have an English teacher, and this is very important to mention considering that in most of the public schools, it is the self-contained teacher, the one who is in charge of teaching English. Number three, we have the support of the entire community, so we also have included preschool and elementary teachers in the institutional bilingual policy. And number four, we have permanent guidance from the British Council. I want to clarify that although they follow the national and district bilingual policy that remarks the fact of centering the strategies in secondary, we as a school have assumed that it is paramount to include preschool and elementary in the institutional bilingual policy agenda. So those privileges led me to reflect on how the public policy is assumed by teachers, schools, and educational community, where the conditions are not the same. I am conscious that even though we have those privileges, there is a big gap between public and private school. That is why I started to conduct a deep documentary research in this field. And there is something important that I want to add in this point, and it is that these reflections have been also complementary with my position as a bilingual team leader in the school, and also with my experience as a material designer, especially for those levels, with my position as a PhD student, and with my experience as an elementary teacher's trainer. So, having in mind this background, the objectives that I have established for this lecture are the following. Number one, reflect upon the conditions for teaching English in preschool and primary in the Colombian public context. Number two, examine the national bilingualism programs and highlight those important facts for preschool and primary. And finally, identify the crucial points that must be considered in the bilingual policy agenda. To achieve these objectives, I have organized this lecture in 3 sections. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the important facts and moments in the bilingual public policy in Colombia. I will focus on those that concern to preschool and primary, of course. After that, I will share the result of a documentary exploration related to teaching English in those levels. I will include how are those results seen from the voice of the actors, that is students, teachers, and policy makers. And finally, I will draw some conclusions. So I will start with the first section. Here I will present a timeline of the bilingual national programs and the remarkable points for preschool and primary. To start, in 1991, the political constitution of Colombia recognized the country as a multicultural nation. In Chapter 1, Article 7 and Article 10, their bilingual status is confirmed for the first time by recognizing those communities with their linguistic traditions. Later, in 1994, the Congress of the Republic issued the General Education Act. Its Article 21 set as one of the specific objectives of basic education at the elementary level the acquisition of elements of conversation and reading at least in one foreign language. And in Article 23, it said that learning a foreign language is mandatory and fundamental in elementary education. 10 years later was established the National Bilingualism Program. In this program was published the Guide 22 about basic standards for teaching English based on the Common European Framework. This document included the standards from 1st to 11th grade, and it set the level that each grade should have. After that, in 2010, as part of the educational sector plan that covered 2010 and 2014, it was established a program for strengthening foreign language competencies of the Ministry of Education. During this program, there were published materials for primary level, including the Bani Bonita strategy that you can find in the Colombia Aprende website, and my ABC English kit. The Bani Bonita included video clips and material for photocopying, and my ABC English kit, it was actually a bag kit that included a CD-room, poster, banners, and some guidelines for the teachers of primary. This program was strengthened by the Act 6051 of 2013, also called the Bilingualism Act, which sought to modify the General Act of Education of 1994. Later, in 2015, it was socialized the Colombia Very Well program, highlighting the model of progression in learning English as it has been developed in other countries. According to this model, learning should start from the higher levels and it should be progressively incorporated into the first levels. This program was replaced a year later by Colombia Bilingual. In this year, for the first time, was published exclusive material for preschool and primary. It included theoretical, methodological, and didactic guidelines for preschool in those levels. The text of reference included basic learning rights, the suggested curriculum, and orientation guidelines for teachers and institutions. Finally, in 2018, it was established the second version of the National Bilingualism Program. This program aimed at improving the initial teachers' training at the normal schools by a project called School to School. It is a project that involved collaborative work between normal schools and non-official schools with high level in English. In this last part, it is very important to highlight how relevant is to improve the initial teachers' training in the context of normal schools, considering that these teachers have a direct impact on preschool and primary students, and that there is a relevant number of teachers enrolled in official institutions. I will show you later in the state of the art the amount of normal school graduated teachers that are enrolled in official schools. That was just a quick review of the Colombian bilingual programs and acts, and I would like to stop here to establish some conclusions and some constant elements that I found in all programs that affect teaching English in preschool and elementary levels. Regarding the objectives, in most of the programs, they are centered in measurable results in the target level of language that is expected in the national exams. As a result, the strategies to improve the English level are centered in higher levels. Those strategies include materials, professional development for teachers, and English language teaching environments. Regarding materials, there is not up-to-date books or resources for preschool or primary, and the ones that are on the Colombia Aprende website are not even known sometimes by the teachers in those levels. And I want to highlight here the fact that I'm not considering that standardized books or materials maybe could be the solution, but it is important at least that teachers can access to certain kind of materials and that they receive permanent training to adapt those materials according to their needs in their contexts. And the last constant element that I found in all programs, and to me is the most important one, is that in any of them it was considered the lack of prepared English teachers for preschool and primary. There is a crucial point that has not been addressed yet, and I will share with you this figure for you to have an idea of how many teachers of English are enrolled in official schools. So there is a total of 14,850 teachers enrolled, and from them, 14,347 are working for secondary, 270 for elementary, and just 9 for preschool. Now let's move on to the second item in the agenda, which is the state of the art in the field of teaching English in preschool and primary. In this section, I will show you the main findings of a documentary exploration. For this, I revised around 50 documents consisting of 3 doctoral theses, 3 research books, and 44 articles. For the bibliometric study, I used databases such as Cielo, Eric Dialnet, DOAJ, EBSCO, GSTOR, Academia, among others. Each one of the documents were classified in a matrix that identified the type of the document, place of publication, year of publication, source, relevance citation, age index, methodology used, and theoretical foundation. I revised in total 32 documents from Colombia, 4 from Spain, 4 from Mexico, 2 from Indonesia. From Turkey, I revised 1, 3 from Chile, 1 from Venezuela, 2 from the United States, 2 from the United Kingdom. The keywords that I used for conducting this exploration were teaching English to young learners, primary English teaching, elementary English teaching, English language teaching in public schools, English in public schools, primary English teaching, among others. The findings were divided into 5 categories. The first one was the conceptual language, materials, English language policy, professional development, and the gap between the state and private schools. Regarding the conception of language, the findings showed that there is a permanency of a structural vision of language in English classes. Learning grammar rules and vocabulary without context is still seen in primary classes. According to Delgado, 2016, there is an incoherence between teacher practices and students' needs. Regarding the second category, Cartoon et al. 2011 remarked the fact that good materials may have an important role to play as they can become de facto curriculum. However, according to Bastidas and Munoz 2011, one of the crucial points in the public policy agenda is the lack of materials for preschool and elementary levels. In Bogota, just to give you an example, some schools receive printed English books and workbooks for 6 to 11 grade, plus specialized material for the national exams preparation. But there were not distributed books for preschool or primary. This means that there are teachers in those levels, or those are the teachers, the ones who must design or adapt materials without having received the training to do so. The previous categories and the ones that are coming are, of course, the result of a bilingual public policy that has not addressed the needs for teaching English in preschool and primary. All programs have assumed a progressive model which, according to Correa and González, referring to the National English Program, is based on the experiences of countries which had supposedly obtained better results in raising the English proficiency levels of the students when they had begun to improve or to implement strategies for improving English from the last grades. The problem is that in Colombia we have had so far 5 programs. All of them are centered on the results in higher levels. And because of the limited strategies for preschool and primary, there is minimum training for teachers in those levels. There is no continuity in the training programs, and there isn't also the conditions for the teachers to receive the training. Furthermore, in some cases, it is not considered the fact that they are not English language teachers. According to Correa and González, some training courses often put together primary school teachers with no preparation in English with English licensed secondary school teachers without considering that their linguistic and pedagogical needs are very different. And at this point, I want to remark that there is a necessity to foster the English component in the complementary cycles at the normal schools, bearing in mind the amount of normal schools graduate teachers that are enrolled in official schools. I will show you in a second some numbers. In here you can see the amount of normal school graduate teachers working for state schools. In Colombia, this is an average between 2017 and 2019. There were in total 17,523 teachers. 87 of them were working for preschool and the rest for primary, and more than the 50% were enrolled in a rural institution. As you can see, there were more normal school graduate teachers working for state schools than English language teachers working for state schools. And if there is something that we have to consider is that those normal school graduate teachers must be able to teach English as they teach in primary and preschool. Finally, the findings also put in evidence the big gap there is between official and private schools. According to Rickson 2013, in private schools, children start learning English at an earlier age than they do in public primary schools. In private schools, they learn with better quality of materials, and they also get more hours of English per week. In the public sector, schools have the autonomy to establish the number of hours per week, but the problem is that there are not enough teachers to cover more hours of English, unless they have a project as the one that I'm enrolled now. In my case, I am a secondary English teacher, but the school implemented the immersion class since 5 years ago, and since that time, I have to ask for a permission to the Secretary of Education for being able to teach English in this immersion class in the primary level. With this condition, students have 2 hours of English with an English language licensed teacher, which is me, plus 1 hour in the regular classroom with the self-contained teacher. So they have in total 3 hours of English class per week, but this condition changed with the COVID because we have to cover both home students and school students, so we have about 1 hour and a half English class every 15 days. Until this point, I have just given you a glimpse how are the conditions for teaching English in preschool and primary in the Colombian public context. But how all this sounds from the voice of the actors, and how is the bilingual policy assumed and seen from the perspective of teachers, students, parents, and in general the whole school community? There is a pluridiversity that has not been recognized. That is why at this point I want to share the voices of some actors in this policy in a real context. So in the next minutes you will read or listen to some real part of conversations that I have had or listened during my teaching experience, and that put into context the reality of teaching English in primary and preschool in our context. So from the voice of the students, there is David, a fourth grader student. And the first day of the English class, he said this to me.
Pero, profe, yo vengo del campo, no sé inglés, a duras penas sé decir thank you.
So it is something like, teacher, I come from a rural zone, I don't know English, I hardly know how to say thank you. Now we have Emmanuel. He is a fifth grader student, and he said this.
Pues para mí lo más bonito de aprender inglés es que uno aprende ese idioma para poder viajar a otros países y conocer cómo hablar con ellos. También es chévere aprender y pues también me gustaría tener más horas para aprender inglés. Sí, porque pues así aprendemos más rápido y no nos demoramos así tanto aprendiendo.
And reinforcing what Emmanuel has just said, there is Jennifer from third grade, and she said, Profe, a mí me gustaría tener clases de inglés todos los días. It's something like, teacher, I would like to have English classes every day. Finally, we have two students more. These were the comments that they posted in a self-assessment activity that I did during this year at the end of the second term. And one of the students wrote as a comment, me gustan las clases, son divertidas, pero son muy poquitas. And another student said, as a suggestion, que tengamos más clases. They wish they could have more classes. And I want to clarify here that those are the perceptions of my students under the condition that I have just mentioned. Maybe I cannot generalize those comments. Those are the perceptions of my students. But maybe in other conditions, in other contexts, the percentages could be vary. So this is just from my position, from the setting where I'm working now, and that is the perception of my students in a urban school in Bogota. Now let's move to the voice of parents. I just have this conversation that I had with one of the parents, and he said, Profe, ¿Con quién tenemos que hablar para que los niños tengan más horas de inglés a la semana? So he said something like, teacher, who do we have to talk with so the kids can have more hours of English during the week? From the voice of the teachers, I have these two comments uh, from two different self-contained teachers from primary. So the first one was, pero si no sé inglés, ¿cómo voy a enseñarlo? If I don't know English, how am gonna teach it? And the other one is something that I heard in one of the classes. Hoy vamos a aprender a formar oraciones negativas con el verbo to be. Today we are going to learn how to make negative sentence with the verb to be. And now I'm going to post here a conversation that I had with one of the curriculum advisors. It was like 2 years ago, and his function was to guide the school toward the implementation of the suggested curriculum. And he said something like this. Profe, las reuniones y capacitaciones son para los profes de inglés, porque se realizarán en inglés. So sorry, teacher, meetings and training programs are for English language teachers because they are going to be developed in English. And with this, we are approaching to the last part in this lecture. And at this point, I want to establish some conclusions that I want to expand with your comments, reflections, or suggestions. And at this point, I may say that there is a need to recognize children in the bilingual public policy at all levels. So not only in the paper, not only in the guidelines, not only in the macro level, but also in our classes, we have to always keep in mind that we are not operators of a curriculum, and we have to humanize our practices, our teaching practices, by recognizing our students and all the pluridiversity that we also have in our classrooms. It is also very important to include teachers from public schools, and with that I mean not only English language teachers but also primary and preschool language teachers in the construction of the bilingual language policies. There is for a macro level and for an institutional level, I can suggest that it is very important to design an institutional bilingual policy that includes all teachers, and not only English language teachers, but also self-contained teachers in preschool and primary. And this is more a call for bilingual policymakers, and it is important to move from English level center goals, so the strategies can be directed not only for the higher levels but also for the first ones. And this is a call for all academic institutions, and there is a need to encourage research in the field. And for teachers, I can say that we need to be more critical and take position towards the public policy. In that way, we have to adapt our teaching practices based on students' needs and conditions. And we need to implement institutional strategies that includes all voices, students, parents, teachers, and the whole community. So this is the end of my presentation. This is a list of reference that maybe can be helpful for you. And this is my email address if you want to contact me for further information. Thank you very much.